You're in the Temple of the Rants, in which I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Talkin, who says, rant about Machi Maho, and if you don't want to read it, rant about delinquents in anime and manga. I don't know anything about Machi Maho, but I can tell you about delinquents a little bit. So, delinquents, it seems like this was a major trend in manga in like the late 80s, early 90s. This idea of the high school delinquent character, these like, basically just impoverished kids who, grow up in bad home environments and they, decide to put on a sort of gangster persona and, go around getting into fights. And I think this is, it's obvious like what the appeal of this is, or like how this reflects reality. Like this type of person really exists, but there's something very distinct about the Japanese like idea of the the school delinquent with the pompadour and the open shirt and the yakuza biker gangs and stuff, and the coarse language, all of which I think comes out of just the way Japanese society is. That in America we have this delinquency, we have the truant student, but there's not like a clear cut identity or like just like one way that this type of person would be presented. And I think that's because we don't have enough of a rigid society. Like there's enough difference between like basically we are encouraged to be individualistic from the get-go. Like people in high school are all going to have their own unique styles, and even though everybody's going to fall into cliques and stuff like that, it's not as though there's one look you can have that immediately communicates a rejection of society, other than maybe a trench coat, But like in the Japanese delinquency, it's like everybody has to wear school uniforms. So if you're modifying your uniform or you're wearing it wrong, that is a slap in the face of the entire establishment. If you're using rude language in a society where politeness is extremely emphasized as a part of your character, you are rejecting all the principles of the culture, So like that crafted image is just like, how can we as immediately as possible, or dyeing your hair yellow, of course, the Yankee look is like, everyone in Japan has black hair, so if you dye your hair blonde, you're making a statement that you don't want to be like everybody else. So, like, I think that's why it has such a consistent image and, communicates something so vividly that you have a lot more trouble communicating in America unless you're drawing, like, a goth kid, but then that comes with its own connotations. It's not just a rejection of society, but it also, implies a lot of other things. Like, it's more of a clique than it is, like, just a symbol of rejection in and of itself. Now, in the late 80s and early 90s, these characters were, I think, taken more seriously and were more popular. But over time, I think that as Japanese society has perhaps loosened up a bit, as it's become that, the Yankee idea is obviously outdated, like people aren't going to dress exactly that way. It's just like, it's become an antiquated thing that is more referenced because of the fact that it's a cultural idea that, like, because Japanese people grew up with these characters being in their media, they then will go on and create that character even at a time when it doesn't symbolize exactly the same thing, when it's not as clear cut as it once was. And it's more just a visual shorthand, it's more of a just a cultural reference point to communicate something about a character as quickly as possible, but it's less couched in reality or in like the original symbolism of it, and more couched in just the fact that this is a character archetype, and therefore it's fun to play with. Yeah, I just said a lot more than I thought I was going to be able to say about this topic.